Hello friends, you welcome to my complete Java course. So today we are going to learn instance initialization block IIB in Java. So what is the instance initialization block? Any class written in Java consists of the following five elements. Five basic elements of a class: variables, methods, constructors, instance block and static blocks. So here first we will discuss about the instance block. On the variables, method and constructor we have already talked. So in this video lecture first we start with the instance block. Instance block in Java. Instance block is an element of a class which serves the same two purpose as served by the constructor. Number 1. Just like a constructor, instance block can be used to initialize the instance variables during object creation. So instance block can be used to initialize their variables when you create the object. Number 2. Just like constructors, instance block can be used to write the logic of the program which has to be executed automatically for all objects during their creation. So in the instance block you can write the logic which will be automatically executed when object will be created. When does instance block executed? If any instance block exists in the program, then for every object during its creation, first of all that instance block will be executed and then its specific constructor will be executed. So when you create the object, so constructor will be called, but before the executing the constructor, the instance block will be executed. So instance block will be executed before the constructor. Need of instance blocks. Because instance blocks are executed whenever the object of any kind is created. So if we want to write a logic which we want to execute on the creation of all kinds of objects, then using instance block is good idea to avoid writing the same logic inside every constructor. Suppose you have a 5 constructor. One parameterized, two parameterized, 3, 4 and 5 parameterized of the constructor. But if you want to some logic, you want to be execute to you want to execute some logic when you create an object. Suppose you create the object with passing the one parameter constructor, create the object with two parameter passing the constructor. So you need to write the same logic in all the constructor. But if you want to execute the same logic with creation of every object, then write that logic in the instance block. So whether you create a single parameterized constructor, two parameterized constructor, 3, 4, 5, every time that logic will be executed and you need not write to that logic in every constructor. The syntax of instance block is just write a curly braces, open curly braces, end curly braces, and write the statements. Note: the Java compiler copies the code of instance initializer block in every constructor. Suppose you create a class B and in the class B you create a constructor B. This is the constructor and you create a instance block. This is the instance block. So when you compile this code, compiler will copy this instance block in the constructor. So after the compilation, the constructor will be look like this: super which constructor add the super in the first line of the every constructor, then it will add the instance block if any. So after the compilation, the code of the constructor will be this. Now here is the example of, we take a class test. In this test class, we define a default constructor. In that constructor, we are not passing any argument. So this constructor will be get executed for first kind of object. Means if we create the object without passing the parameters, then this object will be created. In the same way, this is a one parameter constructor. So when we create a object with passing a one argument, this constructor will be executed. When we pass the two argument, then this constructor will be executed. And here we create a instance block, creation of an instance block. So every time when you will call a default constructor, one parameter constructor or two parameter constructor, every time this instance block will be executed, and it will execute before the constructor execution. So you can see the output instance block, zero argument constructor. Instance block means first it will execute instance block, then it will call zero argument constructor. Again when you will call this, then it will call instance block, then one argument constructor. Again it will call the instance block and two argument constructor. Let's I show you this program on the Eclipse IDE. So now you can see here, I just copy the code from the slide which I have explained to you. So when we will run this code, so here we are creating a three object test, test with one argument, test with two argument. So now if you run this program, you will get the output instance block, zero argument constructor, instance block, one argument constructor, instance block, two argument constructor. So it is clear from here that before the calling the constructor, instance block is executed. So it can be clearly observed from the above program that whenever any object gets created, first of all instance block is executed and then its specific constructor is executed. Multiple instance block. It is possible to have multiple instance block inside a single class. The execution of these multiple instance blocks take place from top to bottom. Okay, now here we can observe that we create a constructor test, a class test, our default constructor test, one parameterized constructor. Okay, now here we also create a two instance block. One is instance block 01, this one, and instance block 02. When we will create a test default constructor, both instance block will be executed, but they will be executed from top to bottom. So when you will create this test object, first instance block 1, instance block 2, then zero argument constructor. When you will create a one argument constructor, one object with the help of one argument constructor, then again instance block 1, instance block 2 and then it will execute the corresponding constructor, which is one argument constructor. Let's I show you on Eclipse IDE. Okay, so just I have copy and paste the code from this slide for the saving the time. And now you can see, first I will comment this one and run it. So you can check that the first instance block will be executed, but they are executed from top to bottom. If here I am creating the object by using the default constructor, so default constructor will be executed, but before all the instance block will be executed from top to down. Now if I execute this one and comment this one, save and run it, now you will get instance block 1, instance block 2 and the one argument constructor. So now we will talk about the important points to note about the instance block. Number 1, instance block will be executed only once for each object during its creation. Number 2, the execution of instance block depends only on the object creation and not on the execution of a constructor. Rules for instance initializer block. There are mainly three rules for the instance initializer block. They are: number 1, the instance initializer block is created when instance of the class is created. The instance initializer block is created when instance of the class is created. Means when object of the class is created, then instance initializer block is created. Or when we create the object, at that time it will create the initializer block. Number 2, the instance initializer block is invoked after the parent class constructor is invoked. That is after super constructor call. Means if your class have a parent class and parent class have a constructor, then the child class instance block will be executed after the parent class constructor will be executed. Basically what happened when you create the subclass object, so first it will check whether there is any parent class. If there is any parent class, it will call the parent class constructor. If parent class also have a instance block, then it will first execute the instance block of the parent class, then it will execute the parent class constructor, then it will execute the subclass or child class initializer block, and then it will execute the child class constructor. So number 3 is the instance initializer block comes in the order in which they appear. Means they will execute from the top to down. Suppose here we take an example, class A, which have a constructor and we are printing parent class constructor. Class B, which extending class A and we are having the constructor. In that we are calling the superclass constructor, which is A. Okay, now we have a initializer block of a B class. The instance initializer block is invoked. Okay, now if we create the object of B class, what happened? First it will goes to the parent class. It will execute the parent class constructor. Okay, because when you create a subclass constructor, it will check if there is in parent class, it will execute the parent class constructor. Then it will print the instance initializer block is invoked. Now it will call the instance initializer block of the child class. Now it will execute the child class constructor. If you are thinking that why if you write the if you are calling the super class constructor, then why it is not calling two times? Because if you because you are writing here explicitly super, but if you will not write explicitly super here, the compiler will add this super constructor here. So whether you define or not, it will be here to execute the superclass constructor. Let's I show you this on the Eclipse IDE. Suppose, okay, so in the example I give the B class, but here we define a test class and it is extending class A. Okay, child class constructor. Okay, now we define a instance block. Okay, now we are creating the test class object. Okay, now if you run this program, so you are creating the subclass object because test is the subclass of the A class. So first it will check there is any parent class. Yes, there is one parent class. So it will execute the parent class constructor. So first it will execute this and then it will execute the instance block of the test class, then execute the test class constructor. So this is the output. Okay, now if you remove the super, then also it will print the same thing, because if you not writing super here, the compiler will add this super here. Okay, now the third point is if you have any instance block in the parent class, then okay, if we add okay, now you will run. First you will call the parent class instance block, because as you create the subclass object, it will check there is any parent class. Yes, so it will execute the parent class constructor, but before executing the parent class constructor, it will check there is any instance block in the parent class. Yes, it has. So it will execute the instance block of the parent class, then it will execute the constructor of the parent class, then it will execute the instance block of the subclass, and then it will execute the constructor of the subclass. So I hope you understand what is the flow of the instance block and the constructor from parent to child. Now we will talk about the comparison between instance block and constructor. So number one, instance block. Instance block logic are common for all the objects, and constructor logic are specific to the object. Instance block will be executed only once for each object during its creation. We can execute the constructors multiple times for a single object by placing the call to them in other constructors. Instance blocks are mainly used for writing the common logic which we want to execute for all the objects. Constructors are mainly used for the initializing of objects. Instance block will be executed only as many times as there are number of objects created in the program. It is not necessary for the constructor as they may be called explicitly. Means if you call the if you create the multi it is not necessary for the constructor as they may be called explicitly. So you can call the constructor explicitly. So friends, thank you for watching this video lecture. I hope you enjoyed this video lecture. So thank you for watching, and watch my next video lecture for learning new things in Java.